Welcome, and thanks for tuning in. If you've been tired of hearing success stories, locked away in boardrooms, bestsellers, penthouse suites, buckle up because I'm throwing the doors open and pulling up a chair for us to eavesdrop on the real journeys of people that I've met, worked with, or been inspired by in this journey we call life. From health and fitness experts to business leaders, CEOs, entrepreneurs, and even the person next door. My goal is to bring you unfiltered conversations with the people who've defied expectations or pushed back on their so-called predetermined path to build something great for themselves and for others. We're peeling back the layers on how they overcome doubts, navigate setbacks, and turn their challenges into opportunities. Each episode is a trove of unconventional wisdom, practical tips, raw inspiration. It's your backstage pass to the secrets of success. No VIP access required. Let's dive right in. So super. So welcome, Nick, and welcome everyone to the first podcast with Dr. Nick, who is known as the Fittest Doc. Nick, if you want to give us just a little bit of a background, I've had the pleasure of working with Nick for over a year, about a year and a half. I'm working with him, and what I was actually seeking out, I was seeking out trainers and mentors that could help me get to the next level. And one of the things that I found was that there was either a perfection around fitness or perfection around nutrition. But what I found with Nick is this real holistic approach that really was what I was looking for. So Nick, if you want to just introduce yourself a little bit about your background.
Absolutely. But first, I have to dispel that lie. What Radia was first looking for was a doctor, and she wanted me to become licensed in her home state. And she would routinely message me on Instagram, and I would routinely disappoint her. And I found she's the reason why I started doing what I'm doing now. So I'll get into that after a little bit of an intro. So my name is Dr. Nick, Dr. Naboise. I'm a medical doctor. I graduated from The Ohio State. Go Bucks, The Ohio State University. I have a bachelor's of science degree in mechanical engineering from Michigan State University. So as anyone can tell by those two degrees, right? Mechanical engineering and medical doctor, I'm just a nerd through and through. Radia has had to face the brunt of it. I'm happy that she's benefited from it. But otherwise, I'm somebody who became interested and kind of became exposed to the world of fitness and health early in my life by my father forcing me to go to the gym, and I hated it. I just wanted to play video games. And around the year 2010, 2011, I got into CrossFit. And I am very happy that that was a very coincidental time because that's also the start of my medical training and medical school. So I had to face the dichotomy between a very sick population and then seeing people who were not only healthy, but were performing at top levels from a physical standpoint, and reconcile how can one apply fitness and sleep and recovery and stress management and nutrition? How can one apply a holistic approach to health and reconcile that with kind of the devastating status of our country as it pertains to a health standpoint? So, I definitely acknowledge CrossFit that has played a large part in my mindset and realizing that, sick care, which is what we have in this country, and health care are not the same things. And that it is very important to understand that there is a nuanced difference, and that's not to scoff at or repudiate doctors who are more in the sick care field. And by those doctors, I mean ICU doctors, emergency room doctors. Those are all sick care doctors. But, when you back up and look at things from a more holistic standpoint, then you realize that there are other people who may not be doctors, but in their own rights, they are more on the healthcare spectrum. Personal trainers, for example, dietitians, coaches, medical doctors like myself who are very much of this mindset and want to not only keep people healthy, but make people better versions of themselves. So that's a kind of a quick rundown on my history. I'm very pleased to be here as your first interviewee, Radia, and I appreciate you for inviting me on.
Awesome. And a couple things that you talked about was one was mindset. Number two, that I think was really fascinating. I remember seeing a post and it was, I think what it said, the t-shirt said, "Does your doctor even CrossFit?" And I was like,
Sure.
yes, this doctor is creating CrossFit and
Sure.
he can help people. So
Yeah.
if you could just tie in a little bit about your certification too with CrossFit and just your
Yes.
mindset, how it helped you with your mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have so CrossFit has a certificate that they've had now for doctors only, for medical doctors only, called the CFMD level one. Very recently, they also started hosting and giving out, when earned, obviously, but giving out CFMD L2 certificates, and I'm very happy. I was actually part of the first group in the
Mhm.
country of doctors, of medical doctors, who we
Yeah.
all went to Aromas, California, and we obviously went through a lot of training and studying and took the tests and all passed and got our CFMDL2. So as a CrossFit medical doctor who has level one and level two training, it essentially means that I am able to utilize CrossFit methodology towards helping people get healthier in any number of ways. And I think that, in as much as Radia, you and I CrossFit, one thing that I tell my patients and I tell my clients is that you don't need to CrossFit. I think all too often there's this zealot mindset when it comes to CrossFit with a lot of people where, they are so enthused about the methodology and the sport, right? Because CrossFit is both a sport and a training methodology. But some people are so enthused about CrossFit as a whole that they have a degree of zealotry around it where they truly believe this is the only thing you can do. And I personally do not believe that. I tell my clients, I tell my patients, I personally want you to do whatever you can sustain, whatever you feel like you can be consistent with over the duration of time, because life is not a sprint. Life is a marathon. Well, if you're playing the game right? If you live long enough, and you're not very short term minded, and you don't pass away in your 30s or 40s like a lot of unhealthy people do, who have been on the news recently, unfortunately. But given the fact that life is a marathon, you need to keep in mind, right? What can I be consistent with? What do I enjoy? And it isn't even to say that exercise is truly just, everybody just, it's like eating cake. Nobody believes it's like eating cake. Nobody believes it's truly enjoyable. But there is a degree of satisfaction that you can get from a chosen modality, a chosen exercise that over time can keep you consistent. And if you're doing something that you truly hate, you're doing something, some type of exercise that groan just thinking about every day, you're not going to be consistent with it in the long term. So yeah, that's a part of my mindset. I love, Radia, that you. I think one thing I've noticed about you is you understand the importance of mindset, whether we're talking about metabolic health, whether we're talking about exercise, or whatever we're talking about. Because I've brought up with my patients, I've brought up with my clients that your mindset is the only thing that will keep you consistent over the long term. Even if somebody points your ship in the right direction, so to speak, and you're able to do things well for a day or two, if you don't have the correct mindset, you're not going to be able to continue doing those things and reap the benefit, right? Reap the reward that comes out of it. You have to keep consistency matters when it comes to doing the right thing. So mindset is really the only thing, in my mind, that fundamentally matters more deeply than even other things, right? You and I, I've had the pleasure of coaching you now for quite some time when it comes to your metabolic health, and we've seen a lot of improvements. But you and I both know that there's four main pinnacles: there's nutrition, there's movement, there's recovery, and there's stress management. But I really think if you back up, there's even a fifth element, mindset, that underlies all of those. Because if your mindset as it relates to nutrition, if your mindset as it relates to movement, if your mindset as it relates to stress management, or mindset as it relates to recovery is not in the right place, I can talk until I'm blue in the face, which as a black man is going to be very difficult for me. But I can talk until I'm blue in the face and just be hammering into you. Hey, you got to be consistent about your recovery, or mitigating and managing stress. And even if you are consistent with what I ask you to do for a day or two, if the mindset isn't there, that's not going to stick. So, it's one of the reasons why, as part of my program now, Roddy, and you've taken advantage of it often, and so have other clients. But I routinely have openings in my schedule and availability where I often advocate and encourage my clients, schedule time with me, schedule a 1 hour meeting with me, or a 30-minute meeting with me, just like this, over video conferencing, where we can either talk with a video conference, or we could talk on the phone. But I think it's very important to have these conversations with clients, or doctors to have it with their patients, even though I understand in the current sick care system that's very difficult. When
Mhm.
you're only when patients feel like they're being run through a mill, and you can only see your doctor for 10 minutes, which is why I try to get out of that so hard. But essentially, I advocate strongly for whoever's a coach in any regard. If you're coaching someone on their health or coaching someone on their fitness, you have to try to have these one-on-ones with them and talk with them, because all too often, if you have these conversations, you will hear your patients or hear your clients say something that they may not think is maladaptive. They may not think there's anything deleterious. They may not think there's anything hurtful about, even self-damaging about their train of thought, the way that they're thinking. But you talking to a coach, or somebody who, is of some, in high regard in some way, they're usually able to pick out the flaws in your thinking, and then they don't need to push back in
Mm.
a they don't need to push back in a dismissive manner. They don't need to push back in a way that'll make you feel bad. But I try to push back, both with my patients and with my clients, in a way that makes them realize, what Dr. Nick said is something I've never thought about in that way. And I can see how thinking that way and continuing with that mindset is damaging me into the future. And then usually, once you show somebody kind of another way, they're usually able to open their eyes and think with another thought pattern that is more conducive to their long-term progress.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really fascinating things that I've learned from you is that you're not hand feeding us all the information, is giving me the opportunity to think for myself. And I know you know that recently I just came to an epiphany about the
Hmm.
way that I was eating my food every day. That just
Hmm.
that something clicked and I figured out what that was. And that was
Hmm.
so much coaching and information that you gave me, but it took me to figure that out on my own, that little nuance piece.
Hmm.
And going back to mindset too, just backtracking a bit to CrossFit, one of those things I think I've seen a lot is people say, well, wow, you CrossFit, there's injuries and incorporated all that could happen. But one of the things, just talk to me a little bit about the community in CrossFit, because I think that helps with your mindset tremendously. That's something I look forward to every day, to go to CrossFit when I can, as often as I can, because it helps me with my mindset.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that community in CrossFit is pivotal. And granted, as I said before, right, I am um, I try to be exercise agnostic. So before we begin this, we have to acknowledge that you can find community in different exercise modalities across the board, right? F45, Orange Theory,
Yeah.
Zumba, all these things I've never done once, but I know there's community there, right? But yeah, I think the community within CrossFit, which you and I are both exposed to, is a beautiful one. Number one, one thing I've noticed about all CrossFitters, right, is you come in initially, your year one, your year two, you are just battered down
Mhm.
by seeing other people beat you in things that you may think you should be able to beat them at, right? So they're setting higher personal records, they're lifting more weight, they're running faster, they're performing the same workouts, the same work that you have to do in shorter amounts of time. And I think that there's then two types of people who respond to that, right? The first person sees that and being just full of ego and kind of a fake self-esteem. They unfortunately want to avoid feeling downtrodden. They want to avoid feeling defeated every day. So what do? They do one of two things. They cherry pick workouts that they know they'll
Mhm.
be good at, and then they don't come to any other workouts, or they just stop coming to CrossFit. They're like,
Yep.
I'll just gonna do something else, right? As if their decision to stop coming to CrossFit means that, beastly Becca in CrossFit class is just gonna go away and she's just gonna stop existing just because you stop coming to class. No, she's gonna keep going and she's gonna keep getting better, right? And you'll see her in a year and she'll just be so much further ahead of you. So that's the first type of person in CrossFit who is exposed to it. The second type of person is somebody who comes in and they notice that, wow, they're getting their butt kicked a lot and they're curious. They're like, this is incredible, right? If I keep this up and I just keep doing this and I listen to the coaches and I change my lifestyle from a holistic standpoint, I could be much better than I am now, right? These are the people who realize that they have been kind of self-limiting by their choices before CrossFit, and that, oh wow, this community is going to just simply push me to a better place, and I have to stay in the fire, so to speak. And those are the people who truly, become fitter versions of themselves day after day. As long as the rest of the things in their life are being changed as well. Because I think that's one thing that CrossFit, and I'm sure it has taught you as well, Roddy, is that CrossFit, if you're that second type of person who you want to stay in the fire and you want to progress, you start to realize with enough CrossFit that if you don't change your behavior outside of the gym, your performance inside of the gym will not change, at least not to your benefit. It might change negatively, but it won't change to your benefit. So if you're the type of person who you start CrossFit and you're drinking every weekend, you're going out, you're getting hammered, right? You're going out, you're eating fast food every day, you're drinking soda and pop, you're getting essentially no whole foods. Your micronutrient profile, unbeknownst to you, is absolutely non-existent, right? You're just not getting the right micronutrients. And then you're going into the gym and you're expecting and you're demanding performance out of yourself. How? Like, where is that going to come from? You need, unfortunately, right? You need the holistic picture. If you really want to get to a place where you're using CrossFit to turn you into a better version of you at 32 than you were at 31, turn you into a better version of you at 45 than you were at 44, guess what? The rest of the puzzle needs to fall into line. The things that you're doing outside of the gym need to be conducive of your progress in CrossFit. So yeah, I think that's one thing I've learned, and I'm sure you've learned that. Actually, Roddy, how long? So I've been CrossFitting now for 14 years. How long have you been in it?
Leave it 7 years.
Yeah. See,
Six.
I feel like there's something about once you're past year two, like year one and year two for me were the hardest. They were like every day I was like, oh, this is
Mentally sore.
yeah. I was like, I would literally lay on the floor and be like, why am I here? Why do I break myself? Why do I walk through those doors? Like, this is bad. This is painful. And then something after that second year, I'm like, heck yeah, let's go. Now I'm sure you're the same way, Radia, but now I'm at the place mentally where I hate it when I can't go,
Yep.
when I'm not able to go, when I'm like, oh, like, my recovery today is not in a place where I want it to be. So from a stress management standpoint, I need to mitigate the amount of physical stress I'm gonna impart on my body today. So I can't go to CrossFit. I literally hate those days. I mean, I put myself through them and I don't go, but it's a very interesting switch to go from a place where you hate going and you
Yep.
question your life and you question your decisions to all of a sudden you switch to a place where you're like, let's go. Like I'm trying to get 1% better compared to yesterday, you know?
Yes, yeah, yesterday was the first time I was back at CrossFit after a week because of conference and the holidays, and it just
Sure.
felt so good to be back, though my
Yeah.
recovery wasn't 100%, not close,
Yeah.
but going in there and adapting, and I think that's one of the things I love so much about CrossFit. You walk in, even if it's a WOD that you think you're really good at, you
Yeah.
never walk out of there and go, that was easy. It just doesn't
Yeah.
happen. So it's
Yeah.
always stretching yourself, which I really, really love.
What's that one quote? I've heard like games athletes, literally CrossFit games athletes say this, but the thing about CrossFit is as you get better, it gets harder. It doesn't get easier. Like cool, like you have more cardio, respiratory endurance and fitness and strength and power and agility and speed. But now that just means that you're just going to push yourself harder in the workout so that you can win by even a larger degree, you know?
And what also really love that you said was that community, but also finding what you love. And I teach a lot of classes in Dale Carnegie, and I talk about stress management and talk about how do you do what you really love, right? Because it has to, again, like you said, be sustainable. And so it's
Mhm.
not just CrossFit, it could be walking, it could be running, it could be hiking, lifting
Mhm.
weights is still important.
Mhm.
And with all the research that I've done, I self-taught in some
Mhm.
ways,
Mhm.
that as we had talked about, like Gabrielle Lyon, like muscle centric medicine. Tell me a little bit about that, because I think a lot of the population, they may see someone or hear, hey, you're doing CrossFit, that's too intense. Why is it so important that we focus on the longevity piece, the whether it's lifting weights, the nutrition, and where does someone even start? If they just know nothing about nutrition, they know nothing about lifting weights, what would be a recommendation you would have for someone just to get started?
Okay, so there's two questions in there.
Mhm.
Let me answer the last one first, and then if
Sure.
you'd like, we can go back to the first one. So ultimately, I think that people overcomplicate starting, right? And I think that people overcomplicate starting because most of us in any venture ever, whether we're talking about school, you know, a business, the gym, a relationship, and a boyfriend or a girlfriend, most of us fear failure. So because we fear failure, we sit here and we're like, oh, how do I start? You just get in your mind about it and overcomplicate things, right? Literally, the best way to start is to just start. You literally, I would absolutely encourage, and I know you agree with this, Radia, that I think, you know, if you go into a CrossFit gym, the thing that I would encourage most people to do, as if you remember, we talked about the two people earlier, right? The two people who start CrossFit. Don't be person one. Try to even before you go into the gym, acknowledge even before you step in, hey, I'm about to enter a place where there are going to be people who I am initially intimidated by. And
Yeah.
it's gonna happen. And that doesn't mean that I should press the eject button and just leave and just avoid them, because that will simply leave me in a place where I am no better than I was yesterday. So even before going in the gym, acknowledge there are going to be people in there who are capable of physical feats that you have never seen before. And, you know, it would actually behoove you, it would be in your best interest to realize that, you know, they are not as cocky or they are not as condescending. Well, likely, I can't speak for everybody, but in all likelihood, they are not as cocky or condescending, or they don't have a hubris as it relates to their physical abilities, because in their mind, that's just normal for them, right? For you, that might be something that's brand new that you've never seen, but in their mind, like it's just normal, right? So you know, I think simply getting out of your head and just taking one step, right? And now we just brought up an example of CrossFit and how to get it started there. But if we want to zoom out and just say exercise, period, I would answer the same way. Simply start, right? You know, if you want to train for a marathon, I would personally start training for a marathon by just going for a walk around the neighborhood and being consistent about it, at least for a couple days, let's say 3 to 7 days, where I'm consistent and hey, I'm like, okay, I'm turning this into a little mini habit. And then after that point, okay, start to jog, start to track your metrics, start to track your average running speed, and then slowly but surely build upon build upon that metric, build upon that number, using progressive overload, and slowly let your body adapt. I think all too often, like I said, the nidus, the main centerpiece, the main nidus for most people not doing anything is they have this intrinsic fear of failure, of, oh, what if I start and I fail? But I would actually change that mindset and instead tell yourself, hey, like, what if you continue to not stay where you're at? And the reason why I say that is because I think that's the biggest lie people tell themselves. uh, Nature and physics in the universe doesn't really understand just constant. At any given point, you're either slightly improving or massively improving, or you're
Mhm.
slightly deteriorating or massively deteriorating, right? So if you understand that, then you understand that by you not pulling the trigger and not simply starting and just putting one foot in front of the other, you're allowing yourself that slow deterioration, or even a very rapid one, right? But there's no such thing as, oh, if I don't do anything, I'm just going to stay how I am right now. Nothing's going to change 4 or 5 years from now or 10 years from now. Nothing could be further from the truth. We human beings, the way time works with us, time magnifies the consequences of our actions. So if you're not doing anything, if you've convinced yourself out of starting to exercise for 5 or 10 years, that 5 or 10 years will simply magnify the consequence of your inaction for that 5 to 10 years. All of a sudden, you'll go to your doctor, you'll have various markers of metabolic syndrome, you'll have hypercholesteremia, hypertension, pre-diabetes, an elevated waist size relative to the to a normal metabolically healthy person. And these are all consequences of you failing to take action over 5 to 10 or 15 years. So for some people it can be shorter, for some people it can be longer, but essentially every moment that you fail to make a decision, you're harming yourself. It might be slow, but it's there, right? Like I said, the biggest lie we tell ourselves is just, oh, if I don't do anything, there won't be any harm if I don't do anything. I'll just stay 5 years from now, I'll just be in the same position. No, you won't. That's not how time works. Time will either work to your favor or against your favor based on the quality of your decisions.
Yeah, so that's something that people really needing to know to start now and start small and just build the
Mhm.
habit of
Absolutely.
consistency.
Mhm.
And that's one thing that actually for so long people, when I would interact with friends and colleagues, they would say, "Well, you're so motivated." And I thought, "Well, yeah, I think I'm fairly motivated, but there's days that I have that I don't feel like getting up in the cold and going to the gym and
Me
doing my
too.
target heart rate training, right?"
Right,
And
right.
it's really the discipline. It's
Hmm.
creating the discipline and doing it day in and day out so that you are improving every single day.
Hmm.
Just when you and I have talked a lot about nutrition and fitness and sleep and all of that, and I think there's a shift that's happening in at least the business world of people respecting a little bit less this hustle culture of
Yeah.
where, who had the least amount of sleep, 4 hours, I slept 3 hours, and I'm like, I'm bragging here saying I slept 8 hours, right? So what would just around say sleep, just why is that important? Why, as a you've coached so many people that are incredibly successful, including yourself, right? And you
Mhm.
create health is a priority for you, and that's how you're able to do what you do and be so busy but still prioritize it. So tell me a little bit about sleep and just maybe boundaries and priorities for you that have been really, really important that you might want to share with others.
I think it really goes back to what we were talking about earlier, right? If you prioritize longevity and you realize that life is a marathon and life is a long game, then you have to pay attention, right? And you have to be willing to change your habits. And I think another thing that helps is to look at the alternative, right? Watch the news and see people who ignore, like, there are many proponents, Radia, of the health at every size movement who have died in their
Yeah.
late 30s and 40s this year. Literally, a quick Google search will show you that. And if the life expectancy in this country, being in the 70s, in the early 70s, somebody dying super early should make you raise an eyebrow. So I think ultimately paying attention to the news, paying attention to people who are dying of supposed natural causes super early in
Mhm.
their life, that is motivating. But to anybody with a brain and anybody who can think, that should motivate you to say, hey, this is something where even though you aspire to crush it at work, right,
Mhm.
and rise to the top ranks of your company and essentially fulfill every goal that you have, none of these goals, whether it's with work, whether it's with family, whether it's with a relationship, whether it's with making money, none of these goals are attainable without health.
Yeah.
If your health is not there, and granted, remember what we talked about earlier, right? Your health can be there, but if I were to look at and check various biomarkers and various anthropometrics, I would tell, oh wow, like this person is actually slowly getting worse. If I just look at
Mhm.
the holistic aggregate data picture, so somebody can be healthy and actually be getting worse, where they're basically what they're actually doing is taking years off their life. So
Mhm.
sure, a really good example of this, right? Even though his case is sad to talk about, but is Steve Jobs, who died very young of pancreatic cancer, I believe. And
Mhm.
when you back up and you look at that, Steve Jobs was quoted, not verbatim, but was quoted as saying that he would literally give all his fortune away at the end of his life simply for health and simply to be able to continue to live, right? And unfortunately, from what I have seen as a physician who is unfortunately, and I shouldn't even say this as unfortunately, because I think any doctor who goes through medical training has experienced people dying on them,
Mhm.
whether in the emergency room, in the ICU after running an unsuccessful code blue and being unable to resuscitate somebody, or a longtime patient of yours, dying. Essentially, all of us in the medical profession, we have an experience with death. And because we have this experience with death, with so many patients in the past and through training and whatnot, we have a respect, or we should have a respect. Trust me, all doctors, at least from what I see from doctors' health these days, not all doctors reflect what I'm about to say, but we should have such a degree of respect for health that we realize and we act accordingly as it pertains to prioritizing health in our life. So I think that even if you're not a doctor and you ask the question like you just said, okay, how do we prioritize this and how do we bring this to the forefront? Truly and honestly, I think a way that will quickly pull people's minds out of the sand and actually help you see what's going on is to go to a nursing home, right? Or to go
Mhm.
to an end of life facility, and basically see people, older people who are human, just like you, right? And some of these people aren't even older. Some of these people are younger, and they have been afflicted by cancer. They have been afflicted by issues that are essentially terminal. And you have to, if you once you see that, and you see somebody at varying ages going through the process of death, you start to realize, holy crap, I am not
Mhm.
immortal. Like my lifespan, and more importantly my health span, and you know this, Radia, but one's health span is the proportion of their life that they experience in a completely healthy fashion. So one's health span is completely contingent upon the quality of their decisions. I think that once you expose yourself to the realities of death and the realities of sickness, and you don't shy away from it, you all too often will start to realize, hey, I need to make better decisions on a day-to-day basis, because none of these things that I want, right, whether it's vocational aspirations, or whether it's relationship aspirations or monetary aspirations, none of these goals that you have are going to be attainable if your health is not only in a place where it's good health, but ideally, and you know this as my client, but I want us all to be in a place where we're actually experiencing improvements. Now, it might be very small, it might be just 1% or 2%, per day, per week, per month, per year. But guess what? In my mind, an improvement is always beneficial as compared to going down to a deterioration. So I think that hopefully that answered your question. But I think we basically need to realize we're not immortal. We need to go to places where there are sick people. Like I said, right? If you're a doctor, guess what? This is built into your job. You see sick people, you see unhealthy people. Hopefully that motivates and encourages you to make the right decisions. If you're not a doctor, you're not in the healthcare field, you can still see these people. Whether it's sometimes it's your family, and God forbid, but sometimes it's your family members who are very unhealthy, and hopefully that opens your eyes to prioritizing your own health. But even if everyone in your family is healthy for one reason or another, you can still expose yourself to people who are sick, people who are dying, and that will usually recalibrate your mind enough to say, this is important. I need to prioritize this. If you're anything like me, or Radia, if these people are anything like you, they'll realize something that you've heard me say many times, Radia, and my social media followers have heard me say many times, and that is that I have a strong belief that prevention is better than cure, right? Why am I going to wait for crap to hit the fan? And I'm saying that nicely,
Mhm.
but why am I going to wait for crap to hit the fan for me to be like, oh no, I'm pre-diabetic, or my hemoglobin A1C is 6.7. My doctor just diagnosed me with diabetes. I'm being put on metformin. I just got placed on a statin medication. Why am I going to wait for crap to hit the fan before I decide, okay, let me change my life? And now what you're trying to do is you're trying to catch a runaway train. The train's already left. It's already
Yeah.
departed the station, but now you're trying to run it down and catch it in some bid to reverse your situation, when you could have essentially from the get-go prioritized prevention and put yourself. There are a number of parameters, Radia, and you're aware of a lot of these as we talk, right? But the quickest one that comes to my mind is VO2 max. VO2 max is positively correlated with essentially decreased morbidity, decreased mortality, improved lifespan. One
Mhm.
can quite literally determine your VO2 max and then say, hey, this is how long, as of right now, you are expected to live. And unfortunately, if you're like most people, Radia, not like you, right? I know your numbers, not like me, but if you're like most people, that VO2 max is just going to go down over the quality of your life. It's just going to cascade down. So basically, because you chose not to prevent, or I'm sorry, because you chose not to prioritize prevention, not only are you going to live, not only are you going to have less health span, but your lifespan will quite literally be lower too. Instead of getting to potentially your mid 90s, or maybe living even to 100, now
Mhm.
there's a good chance that you may pass in your late 60s or early 70s, simply because you did not prioritize prevention early enough in your life, and you waited for crap to hit the fan before you tried to reverse your situation. So um
Yeah.
yeah, hopefully that answers that, and if it didn't, let me know and I'll continue.
That, that's interesting too, and that goes to my next question, which is when we think about people that I interact with as well, right? They think CrossFit, they think nutrition, they think health, and a lot of us, and I think I'm guilty of it too. We think immediately like aesthetics, right? I'm in
Hmm.
my 40s, I want to look good. I'm in my 30s, I'm in my 20s, I want to look great, but here for the long game, and so the
Hmm.
longevity piece is really important. And so
Sure.
I think about those people that might want to retire at a normal age, whatever normal age is now, and thinking about their lifespan after that. They need to take all the steps now to do that. And again, it's that those habits, right? The habits that you're building, and it's priorities.
Hmm.
And I've had a really crazy busy schedule, but I found time to make sure it's a priority. And listen, I don't have children, so I don't have that extra, but there are parents that I know that are amazing, and they bring their kids to the
Hmm.
gym, they work out with them. And so I think a lot of it too is how do we focus on that long game? Because we're very much, I think all of us as society are trained to think in the moment right now, and tend to not be thinking about the long-term consequence of not taking care of our health now. So one of the questions, since you are so holistic, I remember you doing a great video on sleep hygiene. That was really, really insightful for me, which got me to start reading on more on sleep. What for you, where have you even seen, just as a doctor, your peers and your colleagues who are lacking, they lack sleep, they don't take the time to, they don't make sleep a priority? Where do you see that people suffering? Because I think a lot of people that I interact with think that sleep is, it's a bonus. You might feel a little better, you might have less brain fog, but how does that impact our health?
in literally innumerable. I'm using that word very precisely.
Mhm.
Innumerable ways, right? Sleep is absolutely coveted, or it should be coveted, and it should be the foundation of recovery. There are definitely many recovery modalities, but sleep is should be the primary recovery modality. Sleep is the only time where, essentially, the way I like to think about it is, as you when you wake up and go through your day, us having this podcast right now, us going to the gym in a little bit, us going to work, even eating food on some level is stressful from a physiological standpoint, right? When you eat food, your your parasympathetic nervous system is upregulated. Your entire alimentary canal, from mouth to the other end is activated, and essentially you're stressing different parts of your body. And if you zoom out, like I said, every part of your waking day is stressful in one way or another to your body, from a physiological sense, from a physical sense, from a cognitive sense, from a mental sense. We are essentially encountering stressors. And that's not a
Mhm.
bad thing, as opposed to a lot of people who kind of look at this from a very facile nature. I don't believe that stress is inherently bad. I believe chronic stress is inherently bad, absolutely. But acute stressors are essentially a hormesis, right? A hormetic stress, where as long as we are undergoing acute stressors and then having the opportunity to recover from them in one form or another, whether that's sleep or anything else, we actually are adapting to those stressors. We're putting ourselves in a position where not only can we tolerate them in the future, but we can tolerate higher degrees of them. The clearest example of this, Radia, that we just talked about is CrossFit.
Mhm.
I'm sure you now would like if you could snap your finger and make a duplicate Radia who just walked into the CrossFit doors, and then you competed against her in a workout, you would destroy her 6 ways from Sunday. You would just this in every capacity, right? And the only reason that is the case, Radia, is because your body has adapted to stressors, to
Mhm.
intermittent, transient stressors of a hormetic variety over the course of 7 years of CrossFit that you said you've now
Mhm.
done, right? So
Yeah.
adaptation is a function of the stress that we put on ourselves. But like I said, the only stress that I'm against is that chronic stress. So zooming back out and looking at the question that you asked me, right? Even when you consider circadian rhythm disruption, of a consistent and chronic capacity, you then increase the risk for innumerable issues, right? Cardiovascular disease, which is the number one killer in this country. You increase risk of almost all types of cancer. You increase risk of worsening and propagation of cancer when sleep deprivation and circadian rhythm disruption is there. You increase risk, obviously, of metabolic syndrome and sequelae of metabolic dysfunction, including but not limited to prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, and beyond. So ultimately, sleep, and not just, I think all too often, Roddy, and you know this as well as I do, most people just say, hey, I just, focus on getting 7 hours of sleep, 8 hours of sleep. But in
Mhm.
reality, there's much more to the picture, which is why I'm super glad that you brought up the video series that I had on social media quite a while back on sleep hygiene, because, there's so many nuances to good sleep that is restorative and that
Mhm.
that kind of reinvigorates you, because good sleep, quite literally, from a disease prevention standpoint, is one of the best things that you can do. And I have personally noticed that, when people do not focus on not just adequate amounts, not just adequate durations, but also high quality of sleep, that not only, not only are they essentially more resistant. So any medication that we put them on, let's say we put them on lisinopril for blood pressure or hydrochlorothiazide, their blood pressure is essentially now refractory. The symptoms and the signs that have necessitated them being put on medication are more resistant to any changes that you would expect from initiating, from starting the medication, simply because they have inadequate duration and inadequate quality of sleep. And this is absolutely a thing, right? Yeah, no, it's huge. And this is why, I tell people, like, you have to sleep is incredibly important. There was a study out of the University of Chicago in 2010, which basically looked at two groups of people. One group of people were put on, actually both groups were put on an energy deficit, were put on a calorie deficit, and they were having the meals that they were eating monitored. So this was a very high quality study as it pertains to logging of foods. However, one group of people was sleeping, if I remember correct, it was less than 6 hours per night. The other group was sleeping over 7 hours, 8 hours per night. By the end of the study, both groups had lost the same amount of weight, but body composition assessment had determined that the group that was on the same energy deficit as group A, but that group didn't focus on the quality of the sleep. Even though they had lost the same amount of weight, more of their weight loss had come from lean mass, which quite
Yeah.
likely is a high constituent of muscle, but obviously, muscle is not the only constituent of lean mass. But that group lost more lean mass out of that total amount of weight loss that was the same as the first group. They lost more lean mass, while the first group that was on the same calorie deficit but could simply sleep longer and presumably had higher quality sleep, they lost more of their weight from fat. And all of the numbers that we track, as you being a client of mine with the Fittest You, and all of the numbers kind of that we're aware of now, we know about, hey, fat burning efficiency, and essentially the fact that right now, as you and I are talking, and we're not eating any food, right? We should, in a resting state, you should be burning a large contingent of fat. However, most people who are metabolically unhealthy and have some degree of insulin resistance, unfortunately, they're burning a large contingent of carbs. And these carbs can come from stored carbohydrate depots, whether that's in the liver or in the muscle, or they can also come from a process known as gluconeogenesis or glycogenolysis. So essentially, it can come from many different places in the body. But essentially, when somebody is of the type where at rest they quantifiably and measurably burn more carbohydrates than they burn body fat, that person is metabolically sick. If that person doesn't have cardiovascular disease, if they haven't had a heart attack, if they haven't had a stroke, they're on the road to it in very soon, right? And I could easily validate this with something as easy as a carotid scan, and you can see atherosclerosis, you can see the plaque buildup, right? So that type of person, they're essentially putting themselves in a position simply by the quality or lack thereof of their decisions, where secondary to metabolic dysfunction, they are predisposing themselves to any number of chronic diseases. So yeah, to go back to your question, sleep is absolutely paramount, right? And as we talked about earlier, mindset, I feel like, is the fundamental crux of the four pillars of metabolic health when you're addressing it. But above that mindset, that's why recovery is one of those main ones, and sleep is a very strong portion of recovery. So I do agree with you. We live in a very kind of hustle hard culture, and to be honest, I'm not against that. I absolutely do believe in working hard and hustling hard, but I also believe, listen, if you're going to hustle hard, you need to recover hard. There
Yeah,
needs to
exactly.
there needs to be that balance, right? There needs to be, this is that stress management portion that we talked about earlier. There needs to be that balance where you recover just as hard, and you have your, like, I know you, Radia, you're like me, where now, right, you have this routine, right, of sleep, and you like, you get annoyed when like you're, yeah, you get annoyed when you're off your routine, and so do I, because I'm like, I'm over here like I'm almost thinking in my head, like, do you have any idea what I physically put my body through every day? Like, I need this recovery, right? So yeah.
It's really interesting. So a couple things going back to it, because I do want to go into the metabolic health
Sure.
component. What is your thought on these trackers? Because I know a lot of people, right? You and I are both Whoop fans, and I talk to a lot of folks who say, "Yeah, I get enough sleep. I sleep for 8 hours or 7 hours." Or people that have told me that they're on, I take a couple sleeping pills before, and though I may say, "Hey, that's like being knocked unconscious. You're not really getting that quality sleep." What is your opinion on that, when I know some people are really tired? They're not really tracking their sleep. And what's the advantage of that? You and I both with the 8 sleep, right? That's another modality to track. So what do you think about that? Like what would be your recommendation to someone who's not tracking their sleep by data points?
Well, I don't know that everybody necessarily. How do I say this? I don't want to just jump to conclusion and say everybody needs to track their sleep. For example, my dad, Radia, he's 73. This man, like, so one thing you may or may not be aware of is as we get older, right? If we just compare ourselves to the normal population, it is actually very, very normal when you look into the partitions and the different stages of sleep. It's very normal that as you get older, that you get less deep sleep and less REM sleep. And that you have a lot of nighttime awakenings, and you actually may suffer from insomnia. That's more and more common. That's more and more common as you get older. My dad at 73, this man sleeps like a babe. Like, he sleeps amazingly, right? So I don't want to just jump to conclusions and say everybody needs to track their sleep. I think people like you and I who are absolutely focused on improvements day to day, absolutely. Like, this should be just another thing that we track. But yeah, I think that, it's something that is absolutely helpful. And for the people that don't do it, usually you can find ways to improve if you do it. As I'm sure a quote that you've heard before, because everybody's heard it, is what gets measured gets managed.
Yeah.
And if you don't measure it, right, you're good luck managing it. And I think one of the benefits, like, I have an Apple Watch, right? And one of the reasons I love this thing is because I can literally look at my physiological data from, I think Apple Watch came out in 2015, so I've had it now for, how many years, and you can basically, I can look at the trend of my data over time. And usually what you'd expect to see in any normal person who isn't fixated on self-improvement and improvement of their health is you'll see a resting heart rate that will increase over your years, right? As you get older and older, your resting heart rate increases. But if you're like you are, Roddy, if you're like me, where we're tracking these things and we're trying to prevent disease, and we're trying to get ahead of the train, right, instead of trying to catch up to it, what we'll notice by simply tracking these things and making the appropriate changes under direction of a coach or anyone else is that your numbers should improve over time. You should realize that the general trend that is associated with a population, all you have to do to win is to buck the trend. That's it. That's literally it. You have to
Yep.
realize, you have to know about the trend in the general population, and you have to say, okay, all I have to do to win is to buck the trend. And I say that because where we sit right now, Radia, 88% of people, 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. So what does that mean? They have some degree of metabolic syndrome. They have some degree of metabolic dysfunction that's quantifiable, that I could literally tap them, anacubital blood draw, and I could literally verify, okay, this person has some degree of sickness, and they may or may not be aware of it, but it's a looming specter, right? So if 88% of Americans are unhealthy or metabolically unhealthy, that's 9 out of 10 people. So when you back up and you think about, okay, well, Dr. Nick says, my trend is my resting heart rate should go up over time. My VO2 max should go down. All these numbers, But you have to realize that those averages are established within a population that is sick. The average in the population is
Very
sick.
interesting.
So all you have to do to win for yourself, for your family, to be around for your family, to be around for your kids, all you have to do to win is to buck the trend. You have to year over year, you have to know where you're at and be like, cool, I am going in the direction that's opposite to the average around me of 9 out of 10 people who are sick. So yeah, that's personally what I try and do with myself. And I think, Radia, from what I know about you, right, and I have it on good report, right, good accord that with people who have worked out with you that like you are a beast, right? So I personally have never done a CrossFit workout with you, but I've heard from a number of people who are like, yeah, Radia in the gym is just an animal, right? She's a beast, and what that means, how I interpret that is, okay, well, she's going to class, and at her age she's beating people who are in their 20s in the CrossFit class, right? She's just, whether it's the strength or whether it's the metcon, she's beating people who are in their 20s. And I experienced that myself, right, as a newly 40-year-old man as of December 5th, right? A couple days ago.
It's funny. You keep saying 40, and I'm like, he's not 40 yet. You are. You just turned
Yeah.
40.
Yeah. But no, I experienced that too, where I like consistently, this isn't a intermittent, like, oh, every once in a while. No, no, no. I consistently will beat people in their early 20s and their late 20s and their early 30s. And and really, right, this isn't like, oh, Dr. Nick, is taking something or he's somehow cheating. No, no, no. This is
Yeah.
simply the summative consequence of my day-to-day actions. It's the summation of my daily decisions. And it's put you and it's put me in a place where not only are we able to buck the trend of people our age, but we're able to buck the trend of people 15, 20 years younger, right? And if we keep making the decisions that we have been making, that trend will simply continue. I mean, okay, this is gonna kind of a quick aside, but just yesterday, Radia, I'm freaking 40 now as of December 5th, and I PR'd my bench press yesterday, right? My bench
Crazy.
press in the past was, I remember struggling with bench pressing 275 pounds twice. And yesterday I hit a personal record at 350 pounds. I've never benched 350 pounds in my life, right? So how the hell am I essentially putting and this isn't just with bench, right? Today it's sumo deadlift 1 rep max. And the most I've ever done in the past is 530. I'm telling you right now, even before I go to the gym, right now, I'm an hour and a half before the gym. I am going to PR, right? Not, and I can't, Roddy, I'm not just saying that because I know that my autonomic nervous system is in a good place today. I know that I'm well recovered, which I do, because this is what we're talking about. We track these things. We're nerds, right? But it's also because I know that from a nutrition standpoint, I've stuck to my plan. I'm doing what I should be doing from both a micronutrient and a macronutrient standpoint. I know that from a stress management standpoint, I've been following the plan. I know that from a workout standpoint, I've been not slowly, but I've been consistently introducing progressive overload. And as such, given the symbiosis of all these different parameters, everything meeting today means, in my
Mhm.
mind, I am going to hit a personal record on sumo deadlift, and I know it even before I go to the gym, irrespective of my age. This will still, I have literally seen, and I'm sure you've seen this too, Radia, but CrossFit athletes in their 50s, as long as they're like a games athlete and they're high caliber enough, they continue to PR even into their 50s. So I think that this is all backing up and looking at the long game. If you want to be mobile and active and with vigor into your late 40s, into your 50s, into your 60s, into your 70s, into your 80s, then you need to start making the right decisions now. You can't, unfortunately, just the way things are with our hormonal profile, both the distribution of androgens and estrogens and other both catabolic and anabolic hormones in our body and how they trend over the course of our life. We
Mhm.
cannot expect ourselves at 50 or 60 to say, oh, I'm going to change my life around. I'm going to like, I'm not saying that you won't experience progress, because even if you do that, you will experience progress, but you will never get to the place where you are, Radia, where you're beating 20-year-olds, or where I am, where I'm beating 20-year-olds. If you start at 50 or 60, you'll never get to that place. You have to prioritize that early, make the right decisions, hire the right coaches, listen to the right people, quell and suppress your ego, be receptive to information and new knowledge and other insights and other input, right? Because ultimately, if you're not, you're just going to kind of keep yourself in the same place.
That curiosity, right? Because even I think of doing CrossFit for 6, 7 years, but being someone who lifts and has worked out my entire life, there's ebbs and flows, right? And so going back to
Yes.
like tracking things and data, there's days where yesterday I went in and I was like, hey, I don't even know what my back squat is. It's been a while, right? And so just being humble, and I think that's really important. But
Yes.
one of the things that you did talk about with your incredible like bench press, when I saw you post that, I was like, holy moly! But can you talk a little bit about epigenetics? Because you talked about how, or we actually talked about it, where people say, well, my parents, my father is 80, my mother is about 75, and very, very healthy, raised with really, really, great meals, home cooked meals. So I've had some insight into nutrition my entire life. But tell me a little bit about that. When a lot of times there's so much work that goes into staying healthy, with sleep, with nutrition, with everything, right? Everything in your life, mindset. A little bit about epigenetics, because we talked about that the other day. I think just to for those that don't know what it's about, because I'm just
Yeah, yeah.
scratching.
So I'll say it in the simplest terms possible. Epigenetics is essentially, so we all have genetics, right? Our genome, passed down, in a hereditary fashion from our ancestors. But all too often, people like to act like that's just written in stone, so to speak, and that it is unchangeable and unmalleable, and nothing, excuse me, nothing could be further from the truth. So epigenetics is essentially, uh, how do I say this in the simplest way possible? Essentially, imagine that different portions of your genetics can be turned on and turned off, based on your decisions and the quality of your actions. That's what epigenetics represents, right? The fact that, in as much as you may have two twins who are identical twins who have the same genetics, one twin may make completely different decisions, and as we talked about earlier, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So that twin is making consistent decisions over an extended duration of time, and that twin may experience completely different results from the other twin who is not making those decisions, simply because of epigenetics. And there's other fields, right? There's also something called nutrigenomics, where essentially the foods that you're eating are turning on and turning off different parts of your genetic, your genetic material. So ultimately, this is why I'm not a big fan of people just assuming and getting downtrodden in their head, and doing what we talked about earlier, and exercising a poor mindset and believing, oh, well, I don't know, diabetes is in my family. I'm just going to get it. And like, nothing could be further from the truth. Diabetes is in my family. Diabetes, high blood pressure, glaucoma are in my family. Yet as a 40-year-old man, I have none of that, and I'm on no medications, right? So if I were to completely adopt that mindset in my early 20s or in my 30s, that, hey, my family has a family history, or has a family medical history of these issues, I'm just going to get them. What do you think that would induce me to participate in, from a recreational and from an action based standpoint? All of a sudden, if I have that defeatist, self defeating mindset, I'm just gonna go to McDonald's every day and go to Burger King
Yeah.
every day and eat trash every day, and don't focus on my sleep, and start smoking, or do something stupid. And the only reason why I would do that is because in my mind I have this one word: inevitable. And I'm like, hey, it's inevitable, it's going to happen, when it isn't inevitable. Because genetics, as I said, I understand that the public has a very kind of simple, not even explanation, but a very simple understanding of genetics where to them it's black and white. It's written in concrete or it's not.
Yeah.
But nothing could be further from the truth. The quality of your decisions and your actions taken over an extended duration of time and summed over that duration of time can result in you being much healthier and in a much better place from a health standpoint as compared to members of your kin, as compared to members of your family, the people who share the same genetics as you do, and you can be quite literally miles ahead of them simply because you made different decisions. So I love the fact that you brought that up, and I think people should look into, if you want to look into it, everybody just EPI and then genetics. And then it's a big world, but definitely learn, because I think that once you realize that there is hope,
Mm.
it gives you the capacity and it gives you the motivation to make better choices for the long run, and for the sake of being there for your family and loved ones into the far future.
Yeah, I think ultimately that's the most important, is really, really focusing on again, the long game, right? So
Yes.
so paying attention to that, and mindset wise, I know for you, mindset is just as equally as important. I know for myself, mindset is too. One of the things that I think I found the most challenging was, I think I went on a much more holistic adventure with you since May, when I got
Yeah.
really involved doing tracking
Sure.
everything. And
Right.
one of the things for mindset, which I found was really challenging, was surrounding myself with people that supported me 100%. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm very blessed. I have people that support me all the time, but
Mm-hmm.
staying away from the late nights, the parties here and there, having to say no a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And just want some advice from you for as crazy and busy as your schedule is. What would be a piece of advice that you would give to people where they might be missing out maybe temporarily, and what do you do? What do you do yourself to stay on track as often as possible? And I know your term is progress over perfection, right?
Yeah, yeah, progress over perfection. Keeping that in mind, I think ultimately anybody who is fixated, Radia, on what you mentioned earlier and what we've talked about in the past, in chats and in FaceTime conversations, but people like you and people like me are interested in persistent and continual improvement all throughout our lives, right? That 1% improvement. And if somebody is really interested in that, they will find, by hook or crook, they will find um, ways to change, and they will find things to adapt, and they'll find things to improve. If you're really fixated on that mindset of 1% improvement, you won't ever get down on yourself. You'll realize that the only way to win the game in the long term is through consistency and through just continuing to do the right things. And I think that personally, that mindset of just consistent improvement is the most powerful thing that any one of us can have. And I realize, that there are some people, like, I think, remember what I told you earlier, that my dad got me into working out and into exercise. And
Yeah.
before then I remember as a teenager, I was like, why am I going to the gym? Like, no, this is stupid. I just want to play video games, right? And so I definitely understand that some can be of the mindset and some can be of the personality where they're just okay with shredding water, right? And as I mentioned earlier, I think this is important. Once you hammer this into your head, you need to get rid of the thought that you can maintain. Tell yourself there is no such thing as treading water. There is no such thing as maintaining. You are either sinking, and you could be sinking slowly or sinking quickly, or you are swimming and crushing that water and staying afloat and and I can't think of a analogy that would fit with the treading water thing when it comes to being better. It's not like we can fly, right? But still, right? You can continuously improve and just get better and better. And I think that one of the things that kind of we have in our favor, Radia, is that I think all too often when people do not use objective means of measurement, they lie to themselves. And they'll say, "Oh, I feel so much better. I'm in so much of a better place than I was last year, or I'm so much healthier." And usually I am so resistant to bull crap that when I hear somebody say that, I'll just say, okay, so what objective means do you have to prove that, right? And I'll literally just, whether it's labs, whether it's metrics, whether it's anthropometrics, which are like body measurements like waist size and waist to height ratio and things like that, I'm a very big believer, and this is probably the mechanical engineer in me, right? But I'm a very big believer in the power of data to reveal the truth. So if you truly think that you're improving, whether it's your performance in the gym and how much you can bench press now compared to in the past, or how quickly you can run a mile now compared to in the past, or your hemoglobin A1C now compared to in the past, or any other lab draw, you should be able to objectively prove your improvement if that is a claim that you make, right? You should not tolerate of yourself, oh, I feel better, or I think I look better, or I like none of this. Like,
Yeah.
I understand the importance of feelings, because I think feelings obviously plays into mindset and
Oh,
consistency. But I think all too often people put way too much importance on their feelings when the data shows that the exact opposite is happening.
yeah.
As compared to what their feelings are telling them. So, um, you
Absolutely.
know, definitely the engineer in me, but trust more, collect accurate data and
Yeah.
trust in the trend. The trend of the data will always tell you a lot. So, as we say as doctors say amongst ourselves with patients and looking at data a lot, the trend is your friend, right? If you look at the trend, it can tell you a lot and can predict things that will happen in the future. And then if there is predictive value in the trend, then there is also preventative value in the trend. You can prevent a lot of disease that would have reared its head otherwise.
And I love what you did. You said that because it's so much more than just weight on a scale, right? There's so many other factors that you've tracked or you have us track
Hmm.
in our accountability, et cetera. So
Hmm.
just to first of all, a huge thank you for your time is so valuable, and I've learned so much over the last year and a half and continue to learn more working with you every single day. What would be a way that people could get in touch with you to find out if like your services would be something that they should take a look at, because I know there's a lot that you offer, and it's a long game. But where would they find that? And obviously, I'll post Instagram and all that below.
Yeah. So really, I think, Radia, given that these are your listeners,
Yeah.
I think that the best thing that I would recommend, right, um, is actually for them to reach out to you. And the reason
Okay.
why I say that is because you realize I literally, like, there are a few other clients who I've ever had who are on your level of realizing the importance of prevention over cure, and not just realizing it, but acting accordingly, right? Your
Mhm.
actions align with what you tell me, with your beliefs. Your actions align with the words that come out of your mouth. And Radia, you know as well as I do, most people, their actions do not align with the words that come out of their mouth. So I think, yeah, what I would recommend is that people reach out to you. And the reason why I think that's a huge benefit is because you can let them know it's different for me, even though what I am teaching you and what I teach other clients is what I do for myself, right? It's literally a system that I designed for myself, and I share with you all and hyper personalize it through cardio metabolic testing, through body composition assessments, and then through the development of a personalized plan. But I think that by talking to you, people will get perspective that I can never share with them, and that is what it's like being on the other side, right? That is what it's like being on the client side, and why you've decided to stick with this for so long and the improvements that you've seen. So I would personally encourage people to reach out directly to you and kind of get the 411 on the inside scoop. But otherwise, my Instagram is the Fittest Doc, TheFittestDoc, the Fittest Doc, all one word. And I'm also on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and yeah, I I'm just doing what I love, right? And oh, one thing I didn't do that I want to give credit for, so I alluded to this earlier. Radia wanted to be my patient for the longest time, and she was disappointed consistently when I messaged her that I'm not licensed to practice to practice telemedicine in her state yet. And then I literally thought to myself, I was like, this is interesting. Why does Radia want to be my patient? And I know she wanted to be my patient because she consistently saw the type of preventative, minded, focused information that I posted on social media. And then I thought to myself, well, you know, I don't given my focus, I don't want to prescribe any medications to her. You know, I don't want to essentially give any specific or write any prescriptions or give any medical advice. Instead, I just want to kind of give holistic advice, that things that I use for myself, day to day living, how to optimize that and improve it in the interest of disease prevention and improvement and performance improvement and weight management and all the other things. So I told myself, I was like, I could just start doing this on a coaching basis. And I did. And Radia was quite literally the first person to sign up. And I'm incredibly appreciative of that, because she showed me that there are other people like her. There are other people who are not interested in the sick care model of medicine, who are not interested in having to go to the emergency room before they realize they need to turn their lives around, or having to be intubated in the ICU before they realize they need to turn their lives around. There are people who realize that there is power in prevention and getting ahead of a situation. And, you know, once I realized that from Roddy and had other clients come on, and I've had a lot of success stories now, that my oldest client, Radia, was a 65-year-old lady who believed that because of menopause, and menopause had she literally messaged me on Instagram saying, "Oh yeah, you know, menopause makes things much more difficult for me than it does for you, Dr. Nick." And I literally messaged her back, "Hey, if you're willing to trust me, I will prove to you by the end of 4, 5, 6 months that you are wrong and I am right." And I was vindicated. I literally,
Yeah.
she left me in a much, both from a metabolic health improvement, all her labs had improved, and her body composition had DEXA verified,
Mm.
had dramatically improved. She had lost all the fat that she wanted to and was down to a weight that she wanted to be at. And it's funny because she was sending me selfies of herself, telling me that her husband, basically her husband was happier than he's ever been, because she basically looked, now she's 65, and she basically looked like now she's in her 30s or 40s in terms of her body composition. She just looked amazing, right? So she's been my oldest client. My youngest client has been a 22-year-old man, and people have been in between. And ultimately, Radia, this is all because of you and being persistent enough, and like stubborn enough, messaging me every couple months, like, yeah. No, yeah, it's all, I love it. I appreciate you, because, you know, it's hard for, it's hard for doctors like myself who don't want to, who see people in the emergency room and see people in the ICU and realize, like, the most depressing thing is seeing a patient who has got into a very unhealthy pace and realizing, holy hell, if somebody would have told this person years ago the same things that I'm teaching you right now, they would have never been here. They would never have had, you know, been intubated and been on mechanical ventilation in the ICU. They would have never been in a place where their family members are surrounding their bed and their family members are crying, all because you didn't save them early enough and give them
Yeah.
the right information. So, you know, ultimately, the fact that I now have an avenue to help people who want to prevent disease, like you, Radia, like, this is literally all because of you. So, any of your followers, thank Radia, because it's literally because of her.
Well, thank you for just the inspiration, the motivation, all of that, because I was going back to what you said about one of your clients. I think I was at a point where I thought the same thing. Hey, I hit 40. I've tried everything. I'm trying everything to lose the extra pounds. And
Mm,
now I'm starting to really see the results and
mhm.
tracking it, right? Tracking the
Yeah,
data,
sure,
not just the pounds on the scale. And it's been amazing. So an
sure.
amazing journey to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and for me too, right? I want to, and I'm sure you're the same, Roddy, but I want to get to 50, looking back and saying, like, right now at 40, I am looking back at 30 and saying, Is there any physical metric that I was better at when I was 30? I literally can't
Okay.
name. I can run a mile faster. I can deadlift more. I can bench press more. I can snatch more, clean and jerk more. All these numbers, right? I want to hopefully get to 50 and be able to say the same thing. And even if I can't, even if I get to 50 and my 40-year-old self is better, what did I tell you earlier? You win by bucking the trend. As long as I'm better than everyone else in their 50s, I'm happy. And
There
I
you
think
go.
yeah, and I think that everyone should share that mindset for sure.
Thank you so much, Nick, for just sharing your expertise
Absolutely.
and just being able to help so many other people too. Because trying to articulate everything you share with me, it's takes a while. This is not I would never study nutrition or anything.
Sure,
I am a
sure,
trainer, and it's totally different kind of
sure,
trainer.
sure.
So thank you for all of that, and you're helping and making an impact on so many people's lives. So the future, which is amazing. So I can't wait to see more people embrace it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me as your first podcast interviewee,
So,
Radia. And yeah, hopefully
you
people
set the
enjoy
bar
this. And
really high.
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I just like having these conversations. Any, as you know, with our client, one-on-one Zoom
Yeah.
calls and FaceTimes. I love nerding out about this stuff and having the conversations and just helping people learn and realize and understand and just you. I want you to take advantage of me and take advantage of my experience and my knowledge and my know-how, and I'm grateful that you are doing that. So.
You know so much. I could have you on here for like 5 hours and still scratch the surface.
Hey, who knows? Like, obviously, I'm the first, but I could absolutely. I've come back onto other. I've made second appearances on other podcasts in the past, so I could absolutely come back in the future. I would love to. So no
Love it.
worries.
So we're
Yep.
really gonna put to be continued.
Yeah. Sounds good. Sounds good. Okay. All right. Bye, Radia.
Thanks so much, Nick.
Yep. Bye.